In this lesson, we're going to learn some of the ways that we can work with video inside of Adobe Photoshop. I have a current example file here up on screen, and I think I'm going to hit the play and I'll explain some of these parts. You see that you actually do have a timeline which you can get from the window inside of Photoshop. And on that timeline, I can have a variety of video clips as well as audio clips and actually create certain effects. I can animate over time with keyframes, and I can apply any graphic element that I can also include in a regular Photoshop file. So in this case, I've got a text element up here that you'll see. So I have video clips that you should download off my website, and those are the ones we're going to use for this assignment. So I'll hit play, and we start off with a little shot. Sound fades in. And I had applied some effects on this clip, and you can see the name is animated. And then we cut to the last clip, and I do have some transitions. I'll actually scrub back and forth here. So there's my opening clip, and as I move along, and it fades from black. And you can see that fading. This next pair of clips is actually transitioning from the normal looking clip to an effect. You can actually apply Photoshop filters to video clips, which is to me one of the really powerful features of actually bringing a clip in at all, and then export it with that effect applied to your video clip. So what I've done here is I've got the same clip twice stacked on top of each other. The bottom clip has an effect applied to it, and I called it filters. And the top one actually is the normal one, but I fade in over time the opacity. So if I open this up here, I have two keyframes, and you can see I'm dealing with opacity, and you can move to the keyframes with the little arrows. So it starts on full opacity, and when it hits this keyframe, it's going to transition to this keyframe. If I move over to that, the opacity is set to 0. If I click on that keyframe, look at my opacity in my layer. It's set to 0. If I move back to the previous keyframe and click on it, the opacity is set to 100. So you can actually animate opacity over time. You can also animate styles, which are these effects elements, and you can animate anything that's a transform. So that's size, location, etc. All right, so what I've animated over time is the opacity of this top clip, which looks normal, and I faded out basically over a long period of time and exposed the exact same clip underneath it with an effect applied to it through my filters. So that's what this is about. I'm going to collapse this again. But any clip you can open up and start to apply animation to the appropriate elements that are displayed. Okay, this next clip up here is basically a text element, and I'll move my playhead over here so we can see it. And I animate it flying in, and once it reaches this keyframe, it's fully on screen, centered. And again, I'm going to use my little arrows to move to the next keyframe. This keyframe, I've animated two things: the size, which is part of the transform, and the style. In this case, the style is an outer glow. So if I go back to the previous keyframe, I have an outer glow on it set to 0. And then on this keyframe, I not only increased the size of my graphic, and I just used my transform tool, I also went into effects and put a very large glow on it. Then the next keyframe is the same as this one, where the glow is set back to 0 and the size is set back to its original size. Then this next keyframe is the location where it flies out of the top, like that. Okay, and once it reaches that keyframe, it's actually out of the screen. So there's some animation that we can do on the timeline. Here I animated some opacity. Here I animated some movement, as well as some styles. In this case, it was the outer glow. And I also changed the size over time. Now if I collapse this, let me just show you down here. These are basically regular clips that I imported. And each clip has its own place on the timeline. Now I'm going to collapse this video group. It's called a video group, and a video group allows you to put several clips on the one track. Otherwise, each clip gets its own distinct track like that. Okay, so these are on their own track, and as I highlight them here, you see them highlighted in my layers panel. All right, so what you are used to as a layer is actually a video clip on the timeline. A video group allows you to put more than one clip on a track, if you will. Okay, if I open that up, you can see them all, and I can highlight them here, and you see them highlighted on the stage. Another thing I have in here are transitions. You can see an icon for it right here. This one fades up from black. This is a cross transition between the two clips, as well as that one. Where we get that is this little icon up here. You click it, and you can see I have fade, crossfade, fade with black, fade with white, fade with color. You simply drag that to the clip. So I'm going to drag one, then I'll delete it. So if I want to fade this out here, I drag it there, and I can double click on that, or I can click on it rather, and just manually move it. Or I can right click on it and set the duration using numbers that I type in. You can see that I have fade, and I can change at this point. Or I can simply delete. So I'm going to delete. I could have also selected it and hit my delete key. Okay, so once again, applying a transition. Just drag and drop, and if I wanted to delete it, I believe if I select it, I can hit my delete key, and there it goes. Okay, or you can right click. I'm just going to save since I made a few changes there. So in a nutshell, that's it. At the bottom here, I have what's called an audio track, and I just brought that in, and you can move it around, and all of these have a little arrow at the end, and depending what kind of element it is, it will allow you to make changes. I can actually change the duration of this. I can even change the speed. I can go fast motion, slow motion. With respect to the sound, I can fade it in, fade it out. I can mute it. I can change the volume. Basic but important elements, and these are just acquired through the little arrow on the end of each clip, and they will pertain to the type of clip we're working with. Okay, so that's really how it works. Why don't I start a new file, and I'll sort of build one up quickly here.